Turkish riot police clash with demonstrators who defy a warning not to mark the first anniversary of anti-government protests. Indian authorities step up their inquiry into the rape and murder of 2 teenage cousins. And tourists return to Thailand despite last week's coup. Good evening, you're watching i24 News. I'm Shachar Peled. Now to our top story. In Turkey, riot police used water cannons and tear gas against hundreds of protesters who defied the official warnings and marked the first anniversary of last year's anti-government protests. Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan had earlier said police would do, quote, whatever is necessary to clamp down on demonstrations. He also urged Turks not to show up at the protests. The Taksim Solidarity, a collective of labour unions, opposition parties and civil society groups, which helped organise the protests, said it would take to the streets again on May 31st. Some 3 million people across Turkey attended last year's demonstrations, which began as a peaceful protest against plans to redevelop Gezi Park, a green corner of Istanbul's Taksim Square, and spiralled into nationwide protests. Earlier we spoke with Laura Wells, a journalist in Istanbul, who gave us this update.
Well, right now I'm in the area. I can't get to Taksim Square. I'm actually on a side street of Istiklal, which is the main pedestrian way leading to Taksim. There are protests going on right now. You can hear them intermittently behind me. I've actually moved indoors because it's so loud outside. But I was searched 3 times even trying to walk to this area, which is not even that close to Taksim because I couldn't get near it. I've never seen a police state, quite like this. This is under complete lockdown at this point. My bag was searched twice. They asked for my ID, and I was just walking around. One of CNN's reporters was stopped in the middle of a live broadcast. I lived in New York during 9/11. I never saw New York with so many police and so much security. It's rather unbelievable. But, the protests are going. They just can't reach Taksim. They're still in Istiklal.
And now in India, authorities are now stepping up their inquiry into the rape of 2 cousins who were found hanged earlier this week. Police said 5 men have been arrested in the case. The i24 news desk has more.
Public anger over the brutal deaths of 2 girls who were gang raped and then hanged is mounting across India. The Chief Minister of the northern state of Uttar Pradesh recommended the Central Bureau of Investigation probe the deaths of the 2 cousins, aged 12 and 14, whose bodies were found hanging from a mango tree Wednesday.
We want capital punishment for the accused. We just want them to be hanged publicly.
The discovery of the bodies in an impoverished village in the Budan district of Uttar Pradesh and the initial police handling of the case is the latest Indian sexual violence case to stir national outrage. 5 men have meanwhile been arrested. The district police superintendent said preliminary murder and gang rape charges were filed against 3 men, while 2 policemen are accused of being criminal accessories. The farm labouring family of the 2 cousins says police could have saved the girls, but refused to help when they found they were from a low caste.
And now in Syria, rebels detonated a large bomb in a tunnel under the old city of Aleppo during fighting with government forces Saturday, killing 20 people. This according to Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Fighting broke out after the explosion and at least 1 rebel was killed, the observatory said. And African heads of state from the 15-member Economic Community of West African States, also known as ECOWAS, convened in Ghana to discuss worsening security in northern Nigeria and Mali. Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama, who holds the rotating presidency of the bloc, said at the opening of the summit that ECOWAS must put in place measures in preventing its member countries from destabilizing other nations. Nigeria's head of counter-terrorism on Friday accused neighboring Cameroon, which is not an ECOWAS member, of failing to make a serious effort to drive Boko Haram insurgents from its territory. And moving now to Thailand, tourists are still arriving in Bangkok, this despite fears that last week's army coup would slash the number of foreign visitors. While some businesses did report a drop in takings for a few days, Bangkok's biggest hotels say business is returning to normal. The next report has more.
The Khao San Road is renowned as one of the busiest hubs for backpackers in Southeast Asia. They stop off in the Thai capital for a few days before hitting the beaches or travelling up north. But hotels here say they had numerous cancellations last week when the army staged a coup and toppled the government. A curfew was imposed that saw bars close early, and local businesses say that hit sales.
Since the coup, things have got a lot worse, because before the coup, I could still make a living, but after the coup, I have earned only a little. Things are harder than before.
Thailand has been rocked by months of protests, which has deterred some tourists from coming. And in the days after the coup, the five-star Labua hotel saw hundreds of cancellations and bookings dropped nearly 70%. But since the curfew was relaxed, the hotel says business is returning to normal.
Thai people actually are such a great nationality and great ambassadors that people always come back. So whether it's tsunami, whether it's floods, or whether it's a political issue, every time the guest has always come back.
There are some soldiers and police on the streets and small daily protests against the coup, but life continues as normal for many people here. At the train station, tourists are still arriving, as well as heading off on day trips to other parts of the kingdom.
Well, we always ask questions about Bangkok, and actually we feel that it is safer than in France. Even if there were some riots, they were covered a lot on TV. We feel really safe, and we haven't seen anything out of the ordinary.
It's at night that Bangkok really comes alive, and although bars are still supposed to shut at midnight, revellers are still out in force. Many countries have issued travel warnings to avoid protest sites, and while many visitors prefer to bypass the capital for the Thai beaches, those who do come here seem determined to enjoy themselves.
And in the latest on the ongoing Ukraine crisis, the country's interim Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk said at a cabinet meeting that the country has paid $786 million in back payments for natural gas deliveries. Meanwhile, NATO will meet with Russia in another attempt to de-escalate Europe's biggest crisis for decades. The i24 news desk has more.
Kiev says Moscow has been paid $786 million in back payments for gas debt. The sum is far less than the payment energy giant Gazprom demands. Gazprom says Ukraine's debt for gas supplies will rise to $5.2 billion by June 7th unless Ukraine begins to pay it off. Kiev said it paid the debt at a rate Russia had agreed to before, nearly doubling the price after the ouster of Moscow-backed President Viktor Yanukovych earlier this year.
We closed all those back payments that are indisputable in our relations with Russian Gazprom. Ukraine will never accept a price of almost $500, and Ukraine will never buy gas for that price.
Meanwhile, NATO announced member states and Russia would meet in June for the first time since Moscow's annexation of Crimea sparked the gravest East-West crisis since the Cold War.
We are right now reviewing our future relationship with Russia. As you know, we have already suspended all practical cooperation with Russia. NATO foreign ministers will discuss our future relationship with Russia when they meet by the end of June. So I would expect all allies to take national decisions within this greater context.
A meeting between newly elected Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko and U.S. President Barack Obama is scheduled for next week in Poland as part of Obama's planned tour of Europe. Obama will also visit the Élysée Palace in Paris on the same day Russian President Vladimir Putin will be there.
And in Indonesia, residents in the surrounding area of Mount Sangyang were advised to stay inside as the volcano erupted, so far leaving no casualties. Ashes from the volcano rose to 3,000 meters high and were moving eastward. Australian media reported most flights out of Darwin have been halted because of the ash cloud. That's all the news for now. Join us back here in just 20 minutes for the latest headlines. And for anything you may have missed, find us online at i24news.tv, on Facebook and on Twitter. I'm Shachar Peled. Thank you for watching.